Welcome back to another episode of Uncut and Uncensored. And well, you guys all know that I live in the Middle East. And funnily enough, well, not funnily enough, but for everything that's happening in the world today, I am learning that marriage is not only a dying craft, but it's also very hard to hold it together with everything that's going on these days, with social media, with choice, with all of these things. And I live in the Middle East where a lot of people, I'm at 49 now, so a lot of people getting divorced. And I've learned nearly 78% of marriages end in divorce, which is a crazy number. So today I'm joined by Jaime Davis, who is a North Carolina board certified family law specialist and partner in the family law firm Grant Hunter Davis and Taylor Gibbs in North Carolina. Welcome. I'm very happy to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I think that it's interesting actually because I've obviously been married twice and this is my second. And going into this marriage, I know that you practice a lot of family law, you do prenup, postnup, all of these kind of things. And I'm in the thick of it. At my age, most of my friends are divorced, or getting remarried, all of which I think requires a lawyer.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely want to have a lawyer involved or any of those things.
I think people really underestimate the power of and prenups, sorry, as well, because we have, I think we're brought up not to ask questions, or, especially my generation. I don't know exactly how old you are, but my generation was asked not to make difficult questions. We were just lucky to get married as women. And I think that that whole thing has changed today, that we should ask questions. We should know where we stand. We should know what would happen to us if things go wrong. And now with the new bill that Trump's just introduced, I've just heard in America, there is no dividing of assets anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So I'm not sure about that, but here in North Carolina, we still very much divide assets. We have a process called equitable distribution, and marital property is anything that the couple acquired from the day they got married until the day they separate. And our courts are going to, in most cases, divide that property 50-50. Of course, there are certain factors where either party, and usually, let's face it, both parties ask for more than half, but typically it shakes out around a 50-50. And you raised a really good point about premarital agreements. I think there is a misconception in society that premarital agreements are only for wealthy people, and that's simply not the case. A premarital
Can
agreement,
I just stop that
yeah, sure.
a second? Also, I think, sorry, there's a misconception that if you ask for one, you don't love the other person.
Oh,
That's what I was
yeah,
going to say.
absolutely. Absolutely. And, you really do need to have those difficult conversations about
Hmm.
finances with your spouse before they become your spouse. I mean, if you guys can't talk about money before you get married, odds are good you're not going to be able to after you get married either. And it's certainly no fun to go into a marriage to only later learn that your, new spouse has a lot of debt or other things that you didn't know about ahead of time.
Which, by the way, I think a lot of women, it's incredible to me. So I had a dinner party the other night and I had a woman that came over, and I'm not going to name names because she'll kill me, but she had like 17 houses before in her marriage. She was married 20 years and she has, I think, 3 children. She has ended up with zero. She doesn't even have her own home, which I am mind boggled by how that can happen. And I always, being in the Middle East too, and it's changed a lot, but it has been stacked towards the men, have said to the women, just because he's rich does not mean you are.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, with a prenup, you can actually do that. You can set up what is marital property, what is separate property, and what either one of you will get in the event that you separate. A lot of times we'll see the wealthier spouse wanting to keep, of course, everything that they had before they got married, their separate property, but they can actually make their income during the marriage separate as well. So that could result in a potentially unfair distribution upon the separation. But The good news is that the laws here at least provide for a 50-50 distribution for both spouses, and it really doesn't matter what gender the person is. It's pretty much a 50-50.
Is that just North Carolina? Because I genuinely did just hear Trump say that there will be no more 50-50 of assets. Last week, he got up and said there'll be no more women, his exact words, using this as a career move.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he would be able to do that. Typically, family laws are state by state. They're not really federal laws at all. They're state laws. And
Okay.
so they are going to vary from state to state. But I would say most states have some form of either what's called community property or what we have here, which is called equitable distribution.
Okay. And, so here we have a difference where I always say to my girlfriends, obviously, if you were married in a European country, you should register your divorce in a European country because otherwise it's automatically Sharia law. I think what it is not saying that setting out and saying that your marriage is going to fail. I think it's so important to have these conversations that, and not blindly go in naively, as it were, to say, it's not going to happen to me. I had an 18-year marriage, and I'm not, nothing happened per se that blew up my marriage. It's just time and growth. And I think being able to have the choice as women to walk away and know that you will be okay is a wonderful thing that I would like to teach my daughter, not because I want her to know that she can grab money from anyone, marry and take money with her, but to know that, if you build something together, your partner's together and you doesn't work out, that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, marriage should be a partnership. And just because spouses have different roles during the marriage, maybe one spouse works and the other spouse stays home, takes care of children, takes care of the home, does all of the things that need to be done in the background to support the career potential of the other spouse, that doesn't make them any less of a partner. Those two people are equals, at least in the eyes of the law, and both of those contributions are appreciated. I think an interesting trend that we're seeing here in the United States, and I'm not sure about Europe and elsewhere, but there has been a large increase in what we call gray divorces. And those are divorces among people who are 55 years old or older. And it's just interesting to see how many folks are choosing to get separated later in life.
Isn't it? I mean, again, I think I live in Dubai, so again, it's a very transactional city, as it were. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of fast cars, men passing through, and young girls. So it is a very, very transient, fast city with and marriages tend not to survive here. And I think at my age as well, 49, this is really where I'm seeing a lot of my friends' marriages break down because it's kind of they have this thing, it's now or never. And, there are a lot of times where I think they should work harder at it. And then other times I think, they would be out the door if they weren't having to sign over half their money, which I can't get my head around either in the fact as like I wouldn't want someone staying with me for that. So I kind of think that setting having the onset of having a prenup already in place and knowing how it was going to be, maybe that makes it easier for people to leave if they want to leave. I don't believe in forcing anyone to be anywhere.
Right. Yeah. I mean, prenups can be very, very helpful, especially I think for second marriages. If people have children that they want to
Hmm.
leave their property to, where I practice, there are certain inheritance rights that you acquire just by virtue of the fact that you got married. And so, what you can do with the prenup is waive those rights so that you can, of course, still leave property to your spouse in a will if you choose to do that, but your spouse can't contest it if you choose to leave your property to, let's say, your children from your prior relationship.
I think that's actually a very family law here. It's a very difficult one because obviously I think how does it work there? If you get divorced, it's 50-50 with the children automatically, or because I here we have a lot of a struggle where men will use the children as a pawn in the divorce to sort of rattle the wife so that she's so concerned with the kids she won't think about the money.
So I think that's a pretty common phenomenon that folks will try to use the children as leverage. It's a terrible thing to do, of course, but here again, where I practice, so custody is based on what's in the best interest of the children. It's subjective. Um, but I will tell you that our judges tend to lean toward 50-50 custody schedules unless there is some, very compelling reason why one parent is not fit and suitable to have 50% time with the kids. Research has shown that children benefit from having both parents involved in their lives. And so I think that it's probably a good thing. But of course, you always have cases where, one parent may not want 50-50 time with the kids. They may be okay with their spouse having primary custody and them just having visitation, every other weekend or something like that. It really just depends.
Practicing family law today, what do you see as one of the major catalysts for the breakdown of marriages?
I think there are a lot. I think that there has been an increase in gray divorces, like I mentioned earlier, because women are not having to stay in marriages that they're not happy in. There's actually another trend that women are initiating separations more than men now, at least again in the States. I can't speak for elsewhere, but um, I
Do
think
you think, sorry, do you think that's due to the fact that men are scared to do it because they don't want to lose their wealth, or they just genuinely don't instigate marriage because they don't really like change?
I think it has to do more with the women. I think the women have more financial power now, more are working.
Hmm.
There's a lot more marriages where the woman may be the breadwinner. And so she now has the resources where if she's not happy, she can do something about it. And also, people are living longer and they are staying healthier for longer. And so, now if you're getting divorced in your, let's say your 50s, you still have a lot of life left to live, and there's no point in staying in a situation where you're not happy if you can perhaps have a second chance, get that do-over, and do what you really want in life.
I mean, we're staying healthier longer, we're looking better. I mean, I've had a full facelift. My husband's 20 years younger than me, so I completely see a shift in the way people look at older women too, especially, funnily enough, in places where you have, like Dubai, because you have very easy come easy go sort of younger women in that. Now I think the tables are turning where men are seeing that older women bring a lot to the table as well. So I think older women were scared to get divorced and scared of what would happen to them in their old age. That is also not so much of a thing anymore.
Yeah, that's a very great point that you make about that. And you and I are in very similar situations. I am 48 and my husband is 13 years younger than me, so I can
Oh,
relate.
wow. And so what would you say? So he's your second marriage?
Yes.
So from your first marriage, what were all the changes you made?
Gosh,
Legally,
changes.
financially, because 13 years younger, I'm presuming, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the more successful one at that time.
Back then, I've been divorced now for, gosh, probably 12 years or so. Um, and, remarried, have a blended family, do all the things. Um, it works. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I think the one thing that really helped me with my first divorce was that I knew what to expect and I knew what not to fight over. We actually had a fairly amicable separation. We were able to reach a separation agreement where we agreed on all of the things. And I think that's because I knew what highly contentious divorce litigation can do to children. I had two young kids at the time. My son was 2 and my daughter was 8. And I did not want to put them through that. And so we went our separate ways and we've been sharing custody of our kids now for a long time. Like I said, 12 years. My oldest daughter is actually a sophomore in college now, so it doesn't really apply to her. but it went pretty well. And I think it taught me in my second marriage that the things that I needed to pay attention to keep the marriage good and on track, and to not be afraid to talk about your feelings and those sorts of things.
Oh my God, we're the same person. My daughter's just gone to college, and they were about 9 when Sergio came into their lives. But I was obviously the older one, and I took control of the house and all of the things and making it run. And we work as a team now. But the one thing, you're right, I think I know what went wrong, I know where it went wrong. But I have a great relationship now with my ex husband, which is actually better because I have like a business partner there, and we shared one lawyer. And I think the most amazing thing is, even though you are a lawyer, I think the most important thing is try to get out of this without fighting to the death. How do you? Because everyone says nobody wins except the lawyer, and obviously you're a lawyer. So, do you do you try and get the couples to mediate and to you know because sometimes the all the money they have is being they're so caught up in fighting each other they can't see the wood from the trees. And actually what I try to tell them is it doesn't matter in the end who wins. It truly doesn't, because at the end of the day, sadly, you're stuck with each other till death, because you're going to go to
Right.
graduations, you're going to go to weddings, you're going to go everywhere else. So you can fight, but eventually all that pain and hurt slips away and you do become friends. It may not seem like that for a while, but you can and you will and you have to.
Yeah, I mean, there is no winner in family law. I mean, best case scenario, you end up with half of what you had before and less time with your children that you're used to seeing every day. And so I also host a podcast. It's called A Year and a Day Divorced Without Destruction. And my message to folks and what I want people to learn is that there is a way to divorce without destroying family relationships and the family finances. And I've actually developed a 5 step framework for doing that. Just throughout the 23 years that I've been a lawyer, I had seen the negative impact, as I mentioned earlier, that really highly contentious litigation can have on families and children. And I had also noticed that in cases where the couple was able to settle it, resolve it between themselves, that certain themes started to emerge. And those are the themes that are the foundation of the 5 step framework that I have developed.
I love that. I saw that in your bio, a year and a day. I think that's really clever. I mean, I'm not sure I would have wanted to wait a year and a day, but it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think the idea is
um,
that it gives people time to work out all the other
Simmer down.
issues. Well, and like settle your property, figure out your custody schedule, have that all wrapped up. And, sometimes folks get back together, right? Like sometimes you separate and, 6 months down the road, you're getting back together. So I think also the year helps people make sure that, they're really sure that they want to be divorced.
I think, I definitely believe that route more than knee jerk reactions. And I think when you're in the heat of it, you really think you hate that person, and no one can push your buttons like your husband can, because he knows which buttons to push. But I do believe that everything can be resolved. And I think if you have the right lawyer and picking the right lawyer in these states, these cases, the children are the most important thing. And, to have a contentious divorce in front of the children is what nobody should aim for or want, because no matter what happens, nobody wins. And I think, how would you advise, other than your 5 steps? So if someone comes to you, because also there's this thing that I heard about, everyone rings around all the lawyers, right, to make sure that the other person, you can't represent anyone the husband's called first. Is that right?
Some people do
um
that. They shouldn't, but they
yeah,
do.
and so they do, exactly. So, I think there's this whole sort of very not negative connotation. And after many years, sometimes it would be nice if that, like you have said, there is a way that people just suggest that it's done. There doesn't have to be the blame game. There doesn't have to be this giant fight. It just needs to be done in a way that is clean and fair. And I think people lose sight of that because they're so busy wanting to hurt the other person.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the steps in the framework is to get clear on what's most important to you and be willing to let go of the rest. I mean, people fight over the silliest things. And what I tell my clients is that, you know, custody aside, when we are talking about finances, dividing property, spousal support, child support, all of those things, you need to be willing to make a sound business decision. You need to take the emotion out of it and you need to do a cost benefit. And part of doing that cost benefit is factoring in the legal fees, right? Lawyers cost money. And so, do you want to save that money for your kids' college education or do you want to give it to me? And when you do that, I tell them if it's replaceable, replace it. You don't need to fight over, for whatever reason, people love to fight over the wedding china. Like, I don't understand why either one of these people wants the wedding china at this point, but they both want to fight over it. And so I encourage people to let go of the small things and to focus on what it is that they really want to walk away from the separation with.
My God, that's so true. I gave my wedding china away to my ex husband. I gave the china to my ex husband. I was happy just to sort of have all new and start again. But, you know, I've never been scared of working. I think the number one problem, I mean, there's all these women that are now initiating divorce, as you said, because they are at work. And I think, you know, that gone are the days now of a man just taking 100% care of you.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, there are so many more women out in the workforce now that that's less of an issue than it used to be.
What would you say is the number one cause of divorce today?
I don't know that I could pinpoint the number one. I mean, infidelity is still a big issue, of course. That's always going to be an issue. I think folks grow apart. We see lots of issues with alcohol and drug use that can lead to the destruction of a marriage. I think it can be a lot of things. Also, too, if a family has experienced a trauma like the death of a child or an
Mm.
illness, something like that, I think that can often lead to divorce as well.
Yeah. I think, you know, how much, if you are thinking about divorce and going to a lawyer, what is the average cost of a divorce lawyer? I think a lot of people don't really know what it's going to cost them from start to finish. You're talking like $50,000, $20,000 to get divorced today. If you're contentious, 100,000. Like what can people expect? Rough ballpoint.
So there is a huge range, and a lot of it too is going to depend on where you live. I mean, obviously, a lawyer in New York or LA is going to cost more than a lawyer in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where I am.
Can you get
Um,
sorry, can you get divorced in other states or not?
you can if you're a resident. So if
You
you
have to be a
move and
resident.
you've lived there for a certain amount of time, you can, yeah.
Right. So you have to get
But
divorced
in,
where
in
you're.
term, yeah, typically. In terms of an actual like range of costs, I mean, it really just depends. Like for folks who can come to an agreement fairly quickly and they have a relatively small estate, I mean, here you could probably do that for between five and $10,000. Highly litigated cases can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, just depending on the level of fighting.
And what would it cost to put the paperwork into place at the beginning, i.e., the postnup and the prenup? Sorry.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, prenups can be relatively inexpensive compared to the cost of fighting a, financial battle later. I think the important thing to remember, though, at least here with a prenup, you can't put in anything about kids. So just because you've resolved your finances in the prenup, you may still be arguing over custody issues later. But prenups can typically be done for, I would say, $10,000 or less. Many of them can be done for $5,000 or less, and so that is money well spent on the front end to try to save some money in litigation later.
I mean, I've heard stories where they say they don't hold up in court. In your experience, they do.
I think that they are very difficult to overturn. I mean, here there are some key factors that you want to have in place to make sure that it's as airtight as possible. You really want both people to have a lawyer. So you want, if your lawyer is the one who drafted the agreement and you're presenting it to your fiance, you want to make sure that they have a lawyer review the agreement with them. You also want to make sure that you are taking care of the prenup sooner rather than later and not waiting until the night before the wedding to sign it. It's better to sign it ahead of time. But if you do those things, typically it's hard to get out of the prenup. In some cases, there is so much at stake and the estate is so large that it's worth it to the spouse who doesn't have the money to fight it. And in those cases, you really can't prevent them from doing that, but you can try to mitigate the damage by making sure the terms in the prenup are as airtight as possible.
So you are now married to someone 13 years younger, and when you started dating somebody that age and being a lawyer and all of that, did you come across people saying, you're out of your mind, you protect yourself and all of these things, which obviously I'm sure you did back then anyway. I mean, I certainly did. And I'm 7 years in now. I mean, did you go back to your then young husband or still young husband and say, I want all of these things put in place?
So surprisingly, I didn't. We have very much been a partnership since the beginning. And it's just worked. And we've been married for over 10 years now. But yeah, I had lots of people who were very skeptical of my choices at the time, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, me too. But I did actually do it because I did listen. And just not because I thought anything, but I just thought that for me, it would be easier than having a fight with anyone because I do have children. I have grown up children. So, well, teenage children. So I wanted to have that in place. And actually, I think talking about that brought us closer. I think that these kind of initial conversations, as you said, about money, about what's to be expected, about going to the lawyer. We went to the lawyer together. I think was one quite a bonding experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It certainly can be. And those are things you need to talk about. I mean, you need to talk about the finances before you get married because that can be a huge source of stress during the marriage.
Do you feel that women do the worst out of divorce or men?
Um, I don't know that there really is a clear winner or loser. I mean, the laws are pretty straightforward. It's 50-50, right? It doesn't matter who earned it. It doesn't matter whose name is on it. As long as it was not something the person had before they got married or an inheritance or a gift that they received from a third party during the marriage, it's marital property and it's going to be valued and it's going to be divided and the net value of the total estate is going to be divided 50-50 between the folks. So, I mean, I'm sure both parties feel like the other person has won because nobody gets exactly what they want. But I don't know that I could say there's a clear winner or loser in that regard.
I mean, your laws in Carolina are so direct that I mean, it seems like from what you're saying, there's no wiggle room. So I guess people going into it absolutely know what they're getting into because
I
it's,
mean, it gets a little tricky if somebody owns a business. So, you know, while the law is pretty straightforward, things can be valued differently. And so two people may have two very different ideas for what the family business is worth. There can be differences in appraisals of real estate, things like that. And so that's where the argument typically comes in is with regard to these valuations of more complex assets like family businesses.
actually, I mean, that's interesting. You are part of a family law firm. And that is, your business. How on earth would you ever be able to split that with him? Even your share, because if it's not liquid.
I mean, for a business like mine, it really technically probably doesn't have a lot of intrinsic value just because it's each lawyer's name and it's their business that they're generating and
Hmm.
really you would need Jamie Davis to get Jamie Davis's clients to continue coming to the law firm. But for other businesses you can establish a value. It's the fair market value, just what somebody would pay to buy it. And typically, one way that you pay that out is, maybe the other spouse gets more of some other assets. If you have brokerage accounts or retirement or things like that, you could shift to the other spouse. Or sometimes it has to be a stream of payments. Maybe they're paying that, we call it a distributive award. Maybe they're paying that over a period of years to the other person.
And when does it end? Do you have alimony there? When does that, what age does that end for children and spousal
Yeah,
support?
so we do have alimony. Interestingly, there is no formula in North Carolina for calculating alimony, and there's no rule for the duration. So we as lawyers rely on what we call rules of thumb. And one of those rules of thumb is that alimony typically lasts half the duration of the marriage. So if you were married for 10 years, you're typically looking at about 5 years of spousal support if you're the dependent spouse. Um, Other factors can come into play. And again, back to the gray divorces, it gets really tricky when folks are getting toward retirement age because obviously a court is not going to make someone work until they're 80. And so if you're older and getting a divorce, alimony may not be, on the table for you.
And what about supporting the children? How does that work? Who pays for
So
school fees, healthcare, all of the above, clothes, education? Yeah.
That's yeah, great question. It depends. So if the folks agree on it, it can be whatever they want it to be. Mom might have better health insurance, so she keeps the kids. Maybe they divide education fees and things 50-50. But in terms of just regular monthly child support, somebody writing a check to the other person, we have child support guidelines, and it's basically a calculator. And if the family's combined gross income is less than $480,000 a year, these guidelines apply. You put in the mom's income, the dad's income, how much the health insurance is, and the custody schedule, because it depends on if the parents have 50-50 custody or if somebody has primary custody. It affects the amount. And the calculator is just going to spit out a number. For folks who earn more than $480,000 a year, child support is based on the expenses of the children.
And until what age? Because here it's
Um,
21, England is 18.
so we are 18 and has graduated from high school, whichever happens later. So if the child turns 18 during their senior year of high school, child support is going to go until they graduate. Conversely, if they graduate and they're under 18, child support will still go until they're 18.
And so, when people say they can't afford to get divorced, do you, as a lawyer, seeing this every single day, do you think, because I personally believe that if you're thinking it and you want it, you should do it. And then other people are just saying, I cannot afford to. I'm not like you. I don't earn. I don't know how to do this. A lot of people are generation behind us, where they've just been in these marriages and looked after. And they genuinely think that it's better to stay there than rock the boat. When you've seen the other side, do you feel like actually it is? I feel like it's just the beginning for people. I feel like you can have two totally different lives today and do it well, and that marriage isn't what it was, where you just have one single lane and that's the one we're in. And, that divorce can be handled obviously in a way that everyone kind of gets out and wins and gets their new life and their new start if you have the mindset of not living in the past.
So I think it really depends. I mean, the toughest cases for us as attorneys are where there is just not enough money to go around. I mean, we
Yeah.
all know it costs more money to run two households than it does
Hmm.
one. And for folks who may be living paycheck to paycheck, squeezing in another apartment rent might be very difficult. I think that if the person is in that situation and they really want to be separated and divorced, it may mean they go back to work and they start earning some money so that they can afford it. Where there's a will, there's a way. And so if they want to make it happen, they can. It may mean a lifestyle adjustment. Maybe they lived in $1 million house and now they're only going to be able to afford a $500,000 house or whatever just to make it work. So you have to be willing, I think, to have some lifestyle changes if money is an issue.
I think that's one of the issues a lot of women can't come to terms with more than anything is making
Yeah.
those changes because I think, being out of the workforce as well, today it's very hard to get back into the workforce and go back to any sort of corporate job or get your head round living that way. And when we come from places like Carolina or states where there can be a lot of ego involved, a lot of like, it's their identity, which is the marriage and the name linked to them or the things that they have.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if your entire life you have been a stay at home mom and a wife to a particular individual, that absolutely can be the person's identity. And it can be very difficult to consider going down a different path and having to make lots of changes. I mean, even down to your friend group, because let's face it, when folks get divorced, couple friends typically go one way or the other. They're typically not still friends with both people, and so that can be really tough if you end up losing your friend group as well.
What made you, or think about this book, what made you decide to write it? Exactly. What was the trigger? Just seeing so many people come through.
So the podcast actually came first. I started my podcast in the fall of, I think, 2017. And the information that the guests had shared with me was just so great. I really wanted to put it into a book so that it would be accessible to more people. Um, the podcast came about because I had seen in consultations with folks a real need for education in the community about divorce and what to expect and all of the other issues related to divorce, the emotional issues, the financial issues, all of the things. And so I wanted to create a resource for people so that they could go into their initial consultation with their attorney with enough information that they knew the right questions to ask when they got there. And I was also hoping to create a resource for divorce related professionals like therapists who work with divorcing people, financial advisors, all of those kind of folks, so that they would also have some basic information about how the divorce process works and what to expect.
I That's my niche. I need to be on your podcast. My whole one was Divorce Not Dead. I mean, I think it's a fascinating world and mind pit, like mine of information. And I think the one thing, the why mine, I became known for it, as I suppose, is not worrying about society, what anyone's going to think, just to follow authentically my journey, which I've done with the younger man, with the children. And, I think people see us really thriving in a place where I think people expected us or me to fall. And so I love the fact that you've done this book to make people look and really, first of all, dig a bit deeper because I do think that people make very rash decisions very quickly. There's tons of times I hate my husband. I don't particularly want to divorce him, though, again.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is great is that there is much less of a stigma about getting divorced. I think there used to be, as you mentioned a moment ago, a level of shame associated with going through a divorce. And that's just not the case any longer. I mean, the divorce rate is fairly high. It's even higher for second marriages. And so there's no reason that wanting to get a divorce or being divorced should be shameful in any way.
I mean, I think that's an amazing place to end this, but just to say, I absolutely agree. There is no shame in wanting change, there is no shame in growth. And I'm a big believer today that we have all the tools and all the freedom to be able to choose. And it's just making that first step, which is the hardest. And I think the first call, finding your person, finding your lawyer, and you can find what I call a friendly lawyer. I'm best friends with one of my lawyers, and I have a great relationship with him. And in fact, I got married at his house and in Mauritius. So before my actual wedding, and I think if you find a lawyer that you can work with It is one of the most amazing relationships you can have. So thank you.
Yeah, it can
Yeah.
be.
No, it really can be. It doesn't have to be this terrible thing. I think also lawyers scare everybody. As soon as you hear a lawyer, you don't, you're like, oh God, no. So thank you for joining us today, Jamie. It's been amazing. Tell everyone how they can find you.
So my website is divorcestough.com. My podcast is A Year and a Day, Divorce Without Destruction, available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Uncut and Uncensored with Caroline Stanbury. And don't forget to rate and review.